Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're going to be looking at something pretty personal, how we see ourselves, especially when we're kids, and how something as simple as our eyes can really affect that.
Yeah, it is interesting how these little things, these tiny details, can get so tied up in how we feel about ourselves, right? Not just in how we see ourselves, but how we, interact with the whole world.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, the story comes from a chapter called Childhood Flashbacks. It's not about some big event. It's more about the subtle ways our experiences, even the little ones, can stick with us, like way later in life. The kind of things you don't realize have shaped you until much later.
Right. And in this case, the whole thing centers around the author. See, they were the only one in their family with blue eyes. Everyone else had brown eyes. They even talk about Punnett squares, which I thought was kind of cool. Even as a kid, they were already thinking analytically, trying to figure out where they fit in.
And that difference, those blue eyes, it's made even bigger by this joke. They kept hearing they were the milkman's daughter. I don't know about you, but if I was a kid and kept hearing that, it would make me feel like I didn't belong, like I was different somehow.
It's meant to be a funny thing, a lighthearted comment, but yeah, for a kid, it could make them unsure about their place in the family. I mean, think about it. That joke, even though it seems harmless, it touches on something really deep, this need to belong. It makes you wonder how much of who we are is shaped by the stories we hear about ourselves, especially from our families.
That's a good point. And that feeling of being different, you really see it in this thing the author calls the spaghetti incident. Just picture it. An 8-year-old kid, totally excited, piling spaghetti on their plate. Then they hear, someone's eyes were bigger than her stomach.
Yeah. It's a common saying, usually said in a nice way. But what's interesting is how the author, as a child, took it. It wasn't about the food anymore. It was like their eyes were the problem, some kind of flaw. Like it confirmed those feelings of being different.
It shows how sensitive we are as kids, right? How even a comment that's meant to be nice can have the opposite effect. What an adult might think is no big deal can really affect a child, especially when they're still figuring out who they are.
Totally. Kids don't always understand things the way adults do. Their world is still forming, and their sense of self is really fragile.
So the story goes, the author totally loses it over this comment, just starts sobbing, convinced her mom is making fun of her eyes. But what I found amazing was the mom's reaction. She didn't dismiss it or brush it off. She saw how much it upset her daughter and came up with a solution.
That's when it gets interesting, right? Instead of just comforting her, the mom uses this as a chance for growth, like a way to change those negative thoughts.
So she starts this daily thing, this ritual. Every day after school, the author has to look her mom in the eye and answer the same question. Danielle, who has pretty eyes. And the in turn is, obviously, Mom, I have pretty eyes. It sounds simple, but it's powerful. By saying this over and over, the author starts to believe it. It's a perfect example of how we can actually change how we see ourselves just by repeating positive things.
The key is doing it consistently. It's not a one-time pep talk. It's about creating a new habit, a new way of thinking about herself. That kind of repetition can have a huge impact on how we see ourselves, especially when we're young.
Makes you think about the impact our words have, right? On ourselves and on others. Have you ever had something someone said, whether it was good or bad, that really stuck with you?
Yeah, I've had a few. Words carry a lot of weight. Especially when we're young. They shape what we believe about ourselves and the world. It's a big responsibility.
For sure. So, fast forward a few years, the family moves overseas to Belgium. And get this, they actually have a milkman delivering to their house. Like those childhood fears coming to life.
Oh, wow. It's like that whole milkman's daughter joke becomes real. All that uncertainty, the doubts about her family, and they all come rushing back.
The author even says she had this fleeting thought, wondering if maybe the joke was true, if her mom had really had an affair with a milkman. It's this strange mix of curiosity and sadness, and even disbelief. It just shows how those early experiences, even if we think we've forgotten them, can stay with us and pop up in weird ways.
It says a lot about how much those early years affect us. Even if we think we've moved on, those experiences shape how we see things and react to things, even if it's subtle.
This all leads to what I think is a turning point for the author, a confrontation in a high school chemistry class.
Okay, I'm listening. Tell me more.
So picture this. The author's in class with this really strict chemistry teacher, Dr. Protzi. And this guy is intense about chemistry, like seriously intense. He even calls himself the god of chemistry. That should give you an idea of his personality, right?
It definitely sounds like a character.
So one day, the author is just taking notes, looking up at the teacher over her glasses. And suddenly, out of nowhere, he stops the lesson and points at her. You, with the big eyes, he says. And in that moment, it's like all those years of feeling insecure come rushing back. Years after the spaghetti incident and all her mom's positive words, she's back in that vulnerable place, being singled out for her looks.
That's a tough moment for sure. Shows how those early experiences can stick with us, even when we think we're over them. But what's really impressive is how she reacts this time.
Instead of, falling apart or getting quiet, she stands up for herself. Calmly but firmly, she asks the teacher to apologize and refuses to back down. It's this powerful moment, so different from that 8-year-old who ran off crying.
It's like all those years of her mom telling her positive things finally clicked. She knows her worth and won't let anyone put her down, not even a teacher.
Exactly. It's like she's taking control of the story about her eyes. She's saying they're beautiful, and no one, not even the god of chemistry, can make her feel bad about them.
That's a great example of how finding your voice and setting boundaries can be so powerful. It's about knowing your feelings matter and deserve respect no matter what other people think. And realizing those early experiences, even though they shape us, don't have to control us. We can choose how we react to them and write our own story.
And that confidence becomes even more important later on when the author faces a serious health problem. She ends up in the hospital, and for a while she can't really talk. But this is where the deep dive takes on a whole new meaning. Eyes aren't about insecurity anymore. They become this amazing source of connection.
That's an interesting twist. So, in this situation, eye contact becomes everything. It's the main way she can connect with people, doctors, nurses, anyone around her. It highlights how powerful nonverbal communication can be, how a simple look can say so much, like empathy, understanding, even love.
And being in this vulnerable state, the author realizes something profound about human connection. She says, "The eyes of everyone became my everything." It's not just about seeing, it's about being seen, understood, connected on a deeper level. It's about feeling that shared humanity, especially when you need it most.
Wow, that's powerful. It speaks to that basic human need to connect with each other, to be seen and understood. And it suggests that eye contact is more than just a visual thing. It's a way of communicating that goes beyond words and creates a real connection.
Makes you think, doesn't it? How often do we really connect with people through eye contact? How often do we go beyond the surface and see that shared humanity?
It's tough in our busy world with all the distractions. It takes effort to slow down, be present, and really engage with people on that level.
You're right. And it's not just about how much eye contact we make, but the quality of it. Are we really seeing the person, or are we just going through the motions, glancing without truly connecting? This story challenges us to pay attention, look closer, and realize how much power we have in those moments of eye contact. It's about being more intentional and understanding that even a simple look can mean a lot.
What I find fascinating is how this personal story connects to a bigger conversation about how we connect as humans, how we communicate without words. I mean, eye contact is such a basic part of interacting, but we often take it for granted.
I know, right? We're so overwhelmed with information, with screens everywhere, that we forget how powerful it can be to just look at someone, to be present in that moment of connection.
This story reminds us that there's so much more to eye contact than just seeing. It's about acknowledging the other person, seeing their humanity, and creating a space for real connection. Listening to that, it's amazing how important eye contact was for her, especially when she couldn't talk. Makes you wonder what happens in our brains when we lock eyes with someone.
It's a great question. There's actually a lot going on that we don't even realize. Scientists have been studying this for ages, the whole neuroscience of eye contact. And what they found is pretty amazing.
Oh, I bet. So, what is it about eye contact that makes it such a powerful way to communicate without words?
Well, one thing is that it triggers this hormone,
Oh,
oxytocin. We
yeah.
call it the bonding hormone sometimes. It plays a big role in how we bond with each other, how we build trust and empathy.
That makes sense, right? When you look someone in the eye, you feel closer to them, like you're really connecting. It's like saying, hey, I see you, you're here, and I get that.
Exactly. And that feeling of being seen, being acknowledged, it means a lot. It makes you feel safe, understood, like you belong. No wonder the author found so much comfort in the eyes of the people taking care of her in the hospital.
It's like those moments of eye contact or these little exchanges of oxytocin, these tiny bursts of connection that make the bond stronger between two people.
Like a secret language almost, right? This
Mm.
silent communication that says so much about what we're feeling, what we want, even how interested we are in the other person.
There's actually a part of the brain, the superior temporal sulcus, that's really tuned in to eye gaze. It helps us figure out what someone's thinking or feeling based on where they're looking.
So it's not just about seeing where their eyes are pointed. It's about understanding what that look means. Like, are they listening? Are they interested in what I'm saying? Are they happy, sad, angry?
Exactly. Our brains are always trying to decode those little eye movements, figuring out the message behind them. And being able to read those cues is super important for us socially. It helps us navigate all those complicated social situations, build relationships, even avoid conflict.
There's research showing that eye contact activates something called the mirror neuron system in our brains, too. These are special neurons that fire when we do something, but also when we watch someone else do the same thing.
Oh, right. Like if I see you smiling, my mirror neurons fire as if I'm smiling too. It's like our brains are trying to experience what the other person is feeling so we can understand them better and empathize with them.
Yeah, and it's the same with eye contact. When we lock eyes, those mirror neurons fire, and it creates this sense of shared experience, this feeling of connection, like we're stepping into their shoes for a second.
Maybe that's why eye contact is so powerful when we can't find the right words. Like when you're feeling intense sadness or joy or love, sometimes words just aren't enough.
It's like our eyes become this language of the heart, speaking the truth that words can't always express.
Thinking back to the author's experience in the hospital, imagine not being able to speak, having to rely on nonverbal communication to connect with everyone.
In that situation, eye contact becomes more than just a social cue, right? It's a lifeline, a way to express what you need, share how you're feeling, and stay connected to the people around you.
It shows how resilient we are as humans, how we find ways to connect even when things are really tough.
You know, this makes me think about how different cultures view eye contact. In some cultures, it's a sign of respect, but in others, it can be seen as rude or aggressive.
Right. It's so interesting how something like eye contact can mean such different things depending on where you are. And it shows how important it is to be aware of those cultural differences, especially when you're interacting with people from different backgrounds.
We can't assume that everyone sees eye contact the same way we do.
Like if you travel to a place where the customs are completely different, just making eye contact could accidentally send the wrong message.
Reminds us that communication is about more than just words, right? It's about understanding those unspoken signals and cultural norms.
All this talk about the science is fascinating, but it also raises a big question.
What's that?
If eye contact is so powerful, if it can make us feel connected and empathize with each other, do we have a responsibility to use that power carefully?
That's deep. I mean, if our eyes are really windows to the soul, like they say, that every time we make eye contact, it's a chance to connect with another person on a really deep level. It's a chance to see past the surface and recognize that we're all connected.
But it also means being aware of how our gaze affects people, right? We've
Yeah.
all had those moments where someone staring made us feel uncomfortable or judged.
It reminds us that eye contact can be used in good ways and bad ways, like any kind of communication. It can bring people together or it can push them apart.
I guess it comes down to intention. Are we genuinely interested in the other person, or are we trying to control them or judge them?
Our intentions matter, and they show in the way we look at people.
You know that saying, all real living is meeting. I think that's what we're talking about here.
It's about seeing the other person as someone just like us, someone who deserves our respect and attention, not just someone to look at, but someone to truly connect with.
And in that connection, in that shared look, we can create something really special. A bond that goes beyond words and touches something deep inside us.
That's beautiful. It reminds us that eye contact isn't just about seeing. It's about being seen, being present, and being open to that connection.
And who knows what we might discover when we open ourselves up to that.
Welcome back. We've been through this amazing story, right? From those childhood insecurities to this realization about how powerful eye contact can be. What stands out to you looking back on it all?
I think what's really striking is how this one little thing, her blue eyes and a family of brown eyes, keeps popping up throughout her life. It's like a thread that connects all these different experiences, you know? It shows how much our physical traits can get tied up in how we feel about ourselves.
Yeah, and it's not just the eyes themselves, it's how people react to them. Like that milkman's daughter joke or the teacher's comment in chemistry class. They all fed into her feeling insecure and different.
It really underscores how important it is to feel accepted, especially when you're young. The things people say and do, they can shape how we see ourselves, sometimes without us even knowing it. It makes you wonder, what are the stories we tell ourselves and others? And how do those stories, even the ones that seem harmless, affect who we think we are?
That's a great question. It makes you want to be careful about the things you say to yourself and to others, especially kids. But what I find inspiring is how she takes control of that story in the end. Her mom's affirmations, standing up to that teacher, it's like she turned that insecurity into strength.
It shows how resilient people can be, how we can grow and change. It proves that even though our experiences affect us, they don't have to define us. We can choose how we react and create our own path.
And that strength really shows when she gets sick later on, right? The fact that she found comfort and connection through eye contact, even when she couldn't talk, says a lot.
It challenges us to think differently about how we communicate. We tend to focus on words, but her story shows there's this whole other language happening in our eyes. A language of empathy, understanding, that deep human connection, something that crosses cultures and speaks directly to the heart.
And it's a language we all have access to. We don't need special skills. We just have to be willing to look, to really see the person in front of us and let them see us too.
It's about being present, being intentional in how we interact, putting down the distractions, quieting those thoughts in our heads, and just being there in that moment of connection.
And like we talked about, those moments, even the short ones, they can create a ripple effect. They can spread outwards and build a web of compassion and understanding. It's what connects us as human beings.
So, if our eyes really are the windows to the soul, what does that say about how we should treat each other? How should we look at each other and connect?
That's a big question. It suggests that eye contact isn't passive. It's a choice. It's a way of showing respect, acknowledging the other person. And it's a powerful way to create a more caring and connected world. A world where we see each other not as strangers, but as companions on this journey we're all on.
It encourages us to be more mindful of how we see each other and how we act towards each other, to see the power we have in those moments of eye contact, and to use that power for good.
So as you go about your day, think about what we've discovered in this deep dive. Look for those opportunities to connect, engage with intention, and see the world and everyone in it with fresh eyes, filled with curiosity and appreciation.
And maybe in those moments when our eyes meet, we'll discover something amazing. Not just the depths of another person's soul, but also the incredible potential for human connection that's inside all of us.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into perception, self-image, and the incredible power of our eyes. Until next time, keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep looking deeper.